There's relating for you, Ciska, here. Thank you very much for your persistence and patience in making sure that I make it to this session this afternoon. And thank you very much for that introduction as well. And thanks to Heidi, whom I've met, and all the colleagues from the Bridge Group who have agreed to invite me to be part of your 100 more centenary celebrations. It's a great privilege, truly, to be invited to be part of such a celebration, because for us as women, as much as I know the current narrative normally says, don't talk about the first this, first that, it's when you have these moments that you realize that you know what, there's still lots more to be done, even though there's a lot more that has happened in the past. So thank you very much for including me. So outside of this very formal introduction, my name is Nolitha Fakude. I'm a proud beneficiary of employment equity. And again, with this reflection, I wonder where I would have been without employment equity. I started working, as stated, in 1990, 33 years ago, 6 months after Nelson Mandela came out of prison. And the then South African Chamber of Mines celebrated its centenary that year. Today it's called the Minerals Council of South Africa. And 137 years later, in 2021, I got nominated and elected as its first woman president. And I don't think they were sure who they were electing, more than it was the company that I am associated with, because as chairman of Anglo American South Africa, we are a member there. No, it was about getting the right leader in place at the right time. And because I happened to be in the right place, I was a member of EXCO. Then I became the president, but it happened 137 years later that the organization had elected a woman president. Interestingly, as I said to Heidi and Ciska earlier on, that was 25 years since South Africa legally allowed women to work in mines underground. Only in 1996, in the new South Africa, that the legislation in South Africa allowed women to work underground. Prior to that, you could work anywhere in the mines as an administrator or anywhere in the surface, but you couldn't go underground. You can imagine the kind of barriers that has and had for people thinking about mining as a career, and for women in particular. So that's only 25 years ago. So in 1994, South Africa gained its political independence, the majority of its people achieving political and social justice. And sadly, 29 years later, we still are working through the socio-economic justice agenda, a particularly vexing and divisive, if not wicked, challenge of this democracy. In 1996, as I had indicated, South Africa moved away from the International Labour Organization's Convention 45 of 1935, ruling that had barred women from working underground. So the ILO, which is this wonderful body, still had this convention which barred women from working underground, and women were allowed to work in the mines for the first time in different countries, and I will talk about that since then. Before then, amongst many other myths that existed, either that women were bringing bad luck by working underground, or it was unsafe, and all other challenges, Canada was actually the first country in 1978 to allow women underground, and they broke ranks and did that. In 1988, Australia followed suit. South Africa followed in 1996, whilst Chile opened up in 1997. 2018, the ILO working group, one of the working groups, put up a motion to say it's high time Section or Convention 45 of 1933 be reviewed, only in 2018. And because of the processes of the ILO, that agenda item is due for 2024. So 68 countries still do not legally allow women to work underground as minors. So South Africa is amongst those who broke away and made that call 1996 in our democracy. So it's something to celebrate. Now I'm sharing this because we're talking about your centenary, just for me it triggered those parallels. And 27 years later, there are 73,000 women working in the mining sector. In 2021, we had 53,000 women working in the mining sector out of a 450,000 workforce. So we are making strides, but there's still more to be done. And until August this year, of the JSE listed top 40 companies, about 8 women are either CEOs or CFOs, and at least 3 of these women came from the mining sector. Natasha Fakude, Mpumi Zikalala, and Nomba Satengwa. Much more still needs to be done just on the gender agenda of having CEOs and CFOs on the top 40. And the recent announcement of Natasha Fakude moving abroad to be the Chief Operations Officer of Piedmont, a global diversified company in Denver, as much as it's a very significant move for them to appoint her as a COO, because hopefully in 2 years' time when the CEO retires, she's going to be the CEO of this multi-dollar, billion-dollar company. We are delighted for her because it's one of us who's going as a South African to run this global organization. But in a way, it's been difficult to realize that it's still going to take us a long time to get another Natasha Fakude to be a CEO of a company like Anglo American Platinum. And this says a lot also about how women rise in operations rather than functions, because in the mining industry, most excos, almost 40 to 50% of the group excos in the mining companies are women, but they are in functions. They're not in the operations. So technically, we are not seeing the pipeline come through, even though 52% of graduates in university today are studying engineering and mining. So we have to work through the pipeline. And we continue to ask ourselves the question, how do we retain, attract, and make sure that women find careers that are meaningful and successful in mining? So it's part of our journey as well. I was born 59 years ago and grew up in a village in Stutterheim with my widowed mother in the Eastern Cape, where there were no men. They either had gone to work in the mines in Johannesburg, City of Gold, or were in the Western Cape working in the shipyards, or had passed away. My father passed away when I was 8 years old. He never worked in none of those industries. The few men that were around were either too old or too young to work. The young ones especially had one ambition at the time to join TEBA. Those of you who could remember TEBA, and go work in the mines where they will come back either 6 months later or a year later with loads of cash, because TEBA didn't pay you upfront, you paid at the end of your contract. Come back with money, flashy clothes, and if lucky, even a car. Life seemed to be good for the women in the village, though it was a tough yet a peaceful existence without the men. The women worked in peace. Their gardens full of vegetables, they raised their families, and in many instances called the shots in their lives because there were no men to tell them what to do and what to do. So I grew up in this matriarch village and environment. And I know it sounds all too romantic, but take it from the eyes of an 8-year young girl who always had a fascination about mining without fully appreciating how this all came to be. Today, 59 years later, that labor-sending area, the Eastern Cape, once thriving, is now a shadow of its former self. But then I digress from the topic of today. Women in my village, and especially the women in my family, told stories all the time, and that's how we learned and dreamed big dreams. My mother, a teacher and a businesswoman, was a great storyteller. And these stories inspired us to dream and imagine a world full of possibilities, often with women as the heroes of the story. Therefore, whatever I share with you this afternoon, that's my disclaimer. That's where I come from. My route to mining came via other industries, but only fueled by one desire, wanting to be part of the decision makers that are able to make a difference in people's lives. As a shopkeeper's daughter, the worst insult I could have done to my mother was to go and work for a retail company called Woolworths. In her mind, she didn't see the difference. It was one shop to another shop. And it was, you mean you studied all these years psychology to go and work in a shop? What am I going to say to family and other people? But obviously we know those two are very different. And every career decision and choice I made was often influenced by the desire to make a difference in people's lives because of where I come from. On reflection, it was a very naive and idealistic perspective and ambition without a clear plan of how to achieve this, except a strong belief in the inherent goodness of people to see your works and reward you for your efforts and achievements. Thankfully, that belief has been positively reinforced over my 30-year career, many times more, by my mentors, sponsors, and champions, even though there were some who made me to question that belief system. With goodwill and support from mentors, coaches, and sponsors along the way, known and unknown, black and white, male and female, as well as the employment equity regulatory framework, my career was shaped and continues to this day to benefit from the broader South African employment equity legislative framework. Without these interventions, I often wonder, as I had said, how things could have turned out for someone like me. And having said all this, I do hope that I have as well contributed something along the way. And this afternoon, I hope you'll all understand and appreciate my chosen title of the book, which we'll discuss with Ciska, amongst other things, Boardroom Dancing, Transformation Stories from a Corporate Activist. And Wikipedia definition, because I'm with the legal people, of an activist means a person who campaigns to bring about political or socio-political change, a campaigner, advocate, or a reformer. And in my instance, clearly it's about bringing economic change and helping to bring about socio-economic change, especially for women. That's what drives me more. And 29 years into our democracy, it's hard to ignore the fact that the deck still are stacked against women in our country, especially when it comes to socio-economic empowerment. And with the above context and background, I had to find my voice and my own style, soon realizing that learning to toi in the boardroom requires one to find a different dance and style. As much as no two boardrooms are the same, consistency and authenticity in your approach is important. Over the years, I have learned 6 fundamental lessons that have helped me to keep me consistent in my boardroom dancing, ballroom dancing. We've got different dances, the waltz, cha-cha-cha, you name it, and you realize that out of all these, you have to navigate the boardroom using some of those steps, but fundamentally, there are basic steps that you need to keep in mind. And for me, those steps are the values of integrity, humility, or more importantly, ubuntu and authenticity. These have kept me grounded over the years. First lesson has been seeking first to understand to be understood, which is a Stephen Covey principle. And when people disagree or even agree with you, at least you know where they are coming from. I used to worry more when people agree with me because I would think, then I've got it all wrong, because there's a change agent, you expect them to disagree with you. But then you realize that actually we have allies in the boardroom. And those allies don't necessarily have to disagree with you. They can actually help amplify your voice and your position. But it's important to also understand where they're coming from for you to be able to accept that support. The second lesson has been knowing what to stand for, especially your principles and values, because these are not worth sacrificing. They are your most valuable currency. And the most valuable currency, as we know, is your reputation, not the dollar, not the pound, not the yen. And thirdly, choosing your battles in order to win the war. I was fortunate at some stage in that I learned to play chess. And obviously I still suck, but those days, I was a novice. And the person who was teaching me to play chess used to have a Sotho term and say, it's not to run away. Translated, he knows, taking a backward step is not to run away. And it was almost saying, you don't have to always move forward. Sometimes you must take a backward step or sideways move, because your goal, you are clear about what you're trying to do. So choosing your battles in the corporate world is about really understanding that sometimes you make a sideways move or backwards, or you just decide to sit it out for some time and reflect on things. And therefore, for me, that has been quite a very important process of making sure that eventually I get to find my voice at the right time, and also realize that there is greater power in influence rather than in getting the power. And one has to work through those issues. The fourth lesson has been listen, and listen some more. Every voice counts. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we often don't use them in that proportional ratio. So it's important to listen. And as a social scientist, Ciska was asking me whether does psychology help in the boardroom. I said definitely, because you listen for what is not said. You listen, you watch, and more importantly, as a leader, you have to listen to the absent voices. And my greatest fear as a leader over time has been that we fail to listen to the absent voice and those not represented at the table. Or even worse, we fail to hear those whose views we disagree with. And in my mind, listening to all perspectives can only enrich your outcomes. Hence, we need to talk, because it's also about listening. The fifth one has been acknowledging that being the firstborn daughter in my family and the firstborn child, we are called umafungwashe. In Xhosa and Zulu, mafungwase, and I think the Tswanas and others call them Rachadi. It's direct translation, the one whose name I swear on. You know, your aunt, the one when you want to get married and then your family say, have you spoken to your aunt? If you are thinking of doing something, have you spoken to your aunt? And you realize that the role of being that firstborn daughter in the family has got as much privilege as it gives you the chance to influence and shape people's lives and futures, as much as there's responsibility, because you've got to handle that position with great integrity and humility. And in my family, my mother being widowed at 28 years old and me being the firstborn child meant that I was my mother's ears and eyes in spaces where she was not allowed to be as a woman, and especially a married woman in our family. She couldn't go to the kraal, for example, for traditional ceremonies. I would go on her behalf, but obviously she would brief me before to watch out for Uncle so-and-so and what Aunt so-and-so has said, and then come back and we debrief. And then you realize also in the how of your debrief and how you respond, what response you get. So the responsibility of really being in spaces where you are representing others, it's important. And so being that firstborn daughter and being the first amongst equals when you come into a boardroom, you do realize that you've got that responsibility of saying, wait a minute, where are the others who are different from all of us here? Where are the other voices? And use that implicit mandate that you carry, because as a beneficiary of employment equity, you know that you are there representing others, and then also you've got an opportunity to open doors for others to come in, if not in this boardroom, but maybe in another space. And therefore, it's important that being the first amongst equals, you use that opportunity appropriately. It does take courage and confidence, obviously, to be able to advocate for those not at the table. But I also felt that it always was, for me, one of the most empowering things to do, because I'm not speaking for myself. I'm there representing thousands who are not in the room. And that is different rather than asking for yourself. Lastly, social solidarity with your community and the values of Ubuntu are the golden rules. Do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. Simple as that. Lastly, a thriving and healthy South African economy is good for industry, and a thriving industry is good for South Africa. We are deeply interconnected. When South Africa wins, we all win. That's the mindset we should all have. Hence the recently announced Business for South Africa CEO pledge to work with government on the three focal areas of energy, logistics, and law and order, or crime and prevention, or corruption as others call it. And meaningful economic participation of women is going to be crucial as we move forward towards sustainable futures. Hence, the Diversity and Equity and Inclusion Program that we co-launched as Anglo American with Sasol, RMB, ABSA, Unilever, and Standard Bank, amongst others, 3 months ago, to promote inclusive briefing patterns and purchasing of services by these companies from their legal suppliers and service providers is important. This is a program that is close to our hearts in the company and has been championed by our General Counsel, Richard Price, who over the years has been asking the question, how do we make sure that in South Africa, in particular, our briefing patterns reflect our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And through this coalition of the willing companies, the general councils, they have sat together and said they will engage with their partners to ensure that they encourage that when they brief, they see that reflected by the people who come across representing these companies. And therefore, we hope that it will add yet another point of support to make sure that the voice of women 100 years later continues to be stronger. So allow me in closing to salute all our legal trailblazers over the years. I've gone through the list, and these are people I greatly admire, current and those who've gone before us. The legacies they have left behind are many, and however of significance, each gender transformation milestone has to be acknowledged for what it is about. It is a moment that now awaits to be translated into meaningful action by all of us in order for women inside and outside our organizations to experience the benefits that are intended. The moment should evolve into a movement for real change in the economic and social status of women in society and the communities where we operate. And each moment or milestone should be saying to us all, there is commitment from other women to be part of the greater gender empowerment agenda as we work together. Diversity and inclusion is not about representation only, but as well as about a visible and felt uplift in the lives and experiences of women in the workplace, in society, and as well as about being meaningful participants in the economy. Women economic empowerment cannot be subject to any condition precedent. We know that with our allies and stakeholders, collaboration and partnerships will help unlock full opportunities in a sustainable way. A new normal must be built on the UN's SDGs 2030 as foundations, because we know the 17 SDGs are about partnerships, collaborations, and 7 out of the 17 talk specifically to gender equality. Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, former director, executive director of UN Women, and former Minister of Mineral Resources in South Africa, and my own superwoman Shiro as a result for women in mining, once said, the participation of women on different fronts is a fundamental condition for sustainable development, unquote. I couldn't agree more. So myself and my colleagues at the Minerals Council of South Africa will continue to build on the great work that has been started by our predecessors, whichever profession we find ourselves in, to make sure that there's a sustainable future for all our industries in all respects. So many people and events over the years have brought us to this stage of our transformation journey, and therefore we need and dare not fail them. I hope you as well feel the same as women in the legal profession. We are honored to be carrying forward the baton, and we dare not fail even your predecessors. Congratulations to 100 more. Thank you.